Hello, friends. Coming at you guys in the wee hours of the morning with these UFC picks. Chris Curtis versus Brendan Allen 2. These lads will be rematching for this main event taking place in the UFC Apex in Las Vegas, Nevada. I think this card's going to be all right. I'm not expecting anything crazy. I think it might be surprisingly good. It could also be really dog shit. There's a legitimate possibility it's really dog shit. As always, I'm just going to be hopping straight into it, starting off with the early prelims, ending off with the main event. I'll break down some of the physical stats for all the fighters as we go on. Some things of note, interesting things of note, vibes, thoughts, theories, hypotheticals surrounding these fights. Anything that I really found interesting. Starting off with the open prelim of Melissa Tanya Mullins versus Nora Cornoli. Now, Nora Cornoli, first off, I always like to read the physical stats. Sometimes I get ahead of myself and I'll forget later on in the video, but I'm going to try to keep to that right now. Melissa is coming into this fight at 32 years old. She stands 5'7", and she has a 68-inch reach. Matched up to Nora, who is 2 years older at 34 years old, 5'7", and also has a 67-inch reach. Excuse me. Now, Melissa Tanya Mullins is coming into this fight 6-0. She's had one fight in the UFC, which she won. Nora has also had one fight in the UFC, which was successful, that she won, and she is 7-1. I think first off, I'm going to talk about Nora here because most of this pick actually is based on Nora. I'm picking Melissa Tanya Mullins to win this one. If you put a gun to my head, I'd say by decision. If not, maybe submission. Nora Cornoli, for your information, you the consumer, has been farming cans in Morocco for most of her career. That's just what it is. She's been farming bums, 40-year-old bums in Morocco. Now she's coming back. I call fraud. I think she's going to get exposed bad, really. She has a notable finish rate. She's only fought bums. Now, Melissa, on the other hand, she has 3 KO TKOs out of her 6 victories. The other 3 victories have come by way of decision. Her single UFC victory was a decision. I think Melissa has just straight up fought better competition throughout her career. She's a more active fighter than Nora. Something of note, I guess, a notable opponent that she's faced is she beat Daria Zelznikova, who did not fight last week. She was slated to fight Melissa Gatto. That fight was canceled due to a last-minute medical reason. But Melissa finished Daria Zelznikova late round 1 back in 2022. She just seems much better than Nora Cornoli to me, both on paper and from what I've seen. I got to go with Melissa. I think that's kind of light work too. I do think that Nora Cornoli is going to be exposed, but who knows? When I say, hey, it's WMMA, like, I'm not just shitting on WMMA as a whole. It's just sometimes these, actually, let's just leave that alone for now. Moving on to Dylan Budka, middleweight men's bout. Dylan Budka versus Cesar Almeida, or Cesar. Dylan Budka is 24 years old, younger than me. He's 6 feet tall with a 75-inch reach, matching up with Cesar, who is 12 years his senior, 36 years old. A very notable age gap between these two fighters. He stands 1 inch taller at 6'1" with a 74-inch reach. That is Cesar Almeida. Dylan Budka coming in this fight 7-2. He's making his UFC debut. He matches his professional career with a 7-2 amateur career. Cesar is kind of transitioning from kickboxing. He's 4-0 in MMA so far, also making his UFC debut. He's had a late start to his MMA career, obviously, and it's been strange. It's not actually typically late in the sense so much as it's like really, for lack of a better word, inactive. He just hasn't been the most active dude. He's been, easing his way into MMA, been fighting questionable dudes, but ultimately what this comes down to is Cesar actually showed a tiny bit of ground game in his Dana White Contender Series fight. I think enough so that it'll be able to get him through this fight if it comes to grappling. And I think that the striking differences between Dylan Budka and Cesar Almeida is night and day in favor of Cesar Almeida. In favor of Almeida, as I'll call him from now on. Also, Almeida was already slated to fight someone. I forget who it was, and I'm surprised I actually didn't write this down. Cesar was supposed to fight someone, and his opponent fell out. Dylan Budka is now stepping up. Excuse me. Anything else of note? Cesar Almeida has a 75% finish rate by way of knockout, actually. 3 of his 4 victories have come by way of knockout. His 1 decision victory was on Dana White Contender Series. Like I said before, he is an accredited kickboxer. He's fought Alex Pereira 3 times. He went 1-2 in that series. You could say he beat Alex once and he lost the other 2 times. All were decisions, I believe. That saga spanned from 2013 to 2015, so it was a minute ago. I've kind of switched. I was leaning Dylan Budka at first because I felt like I could not pick Cesar Almeida in good faith. The funny thing about that, I get a fucking feeling of impending doom when I pick Dylan Budka. When I start thinking about picking Dylan Budka, I can already see this man not taking him down a single time, like trying to box or kickbox the kickboxer, like just crazy shit. Dylan Budka, very athletic and very young, insane age gap. I will say accredited wrestler, although maybe there's an asterisk to that, because maybe he isn't the most accredited wrestler, but he has wrestled before. I would say that Cesar is a way more accredited kickboxer than Dylan is a wrestler, relatively. But that's it. Cesar Almeida is the pick. Again, if you put a gun to my head, I would say by KO, TKO. Maybe round 2. If I had to guess, maybe round 1 we see a little bit of grappling. Maybe actually, if anything, a slow round, just because Cesar's fighting off the grappling. Maybe Dylan Budka is both engaging with the grappling and also disengaging, like giving up and then starting it up again. Who knows? We'll just have to see. Moving on to a bantamweight men's bout. Jean Matsumoto versus Dan Argueta. Kind of spooky because I'm not sure John Matsumoto is as good as maybe he's being touted to be. But I am going to pick Jean Matsumoto. He is 24 years old, 5'6", with a 68.5-inch reach, matching up with Dan, who is 6 years his senior at 30 years old, 5'7", with a 68-inch reach. Jean is coming into this fight making his UFC debut at an undefeated 14-0. He actually did have a very short, I should say, amateur career. He only had 1 amateur fight, which he lost. But as a professional, he has been undefeated. Out of his 14 wins, 3 of those have come by way of KO, TKO. 5 of them have come by way of submission. The other 6, all by way of decision, including 1 victory on Dana White Contender Series to get him into the UFC. Ultimately, I think it's possible that he's a prospect. He is completely untested, though. Fuck his Dana White Contender Series fight. There is a notable age gap, I think. A 6-year age gap, especially in the bantamweight division, is kind of notable type shit. 30 is not the worst. It's not the worst. It's not like he's old as fuck, though, Dan Argueta. Dan Argueta is coming into this fight at 9-1. He is 1-1 in the UFC with 2 no contests. Which I believe actually happened consecutively. Either way, 2 of his 9 victories have come by way of KO, TKO. 4 of them have come by way of submission. And he is 3 wins, and his only loss has come by way of decision, with 1 of those wins and the only loss taking place in the UFC. I think Dan Argueta, if you look at him on paper, he's really barely hanging in the UFC. It's kind of sad to say. His only UFC win is over Nick Aguirre that was back over a year ago, on January 14th of 2023. So really early on in 2023. I'm going with Jane. I'm going with Matsumoto. I hate just blindly trying to prey on the prospect to actually live up to his expectations, but hopefully Gene just doesn't come out and look like he doesn't belong. That's the one thing I'm asking for in this fight. Just look like you belong, Matsumoto. Please, if you have to lose. Please, brother. Moving on to Cynthia Cavallo versus Pera Rodriguez. This fight got canceled. I'm not going to say anything more than that. We move on to another men's bantamweight fight, a fight that I'm actually looking forward to a lot. Pedro Falcao versus Victor Hugo. Victor Striker is his nickname, Hugo. Pedro Falcao is coming into this fight 31 years old, 5'6", with a 66-inch reach. Victor Hugo, same age, 31 years old, 5'7", with a 71-inch reach. He is 1 inch taller and has a 5-inch reach advantage, which is notable in my opinion. Pedro Falcao is entering this fight at 16-3, making his UFC debut. 6 of those 16 wins have come by way of KO/TKO, including 1 on the Dana White Contender Series, 1 loss by KO/TKO. Another 5 of his wins have come by way of submission, and the last 5 wins and 2 losses have come by way of decision. He is on a 5-fight win streak. Personally, if you were to ask me, and you go to Pedro Falcao's Tapology right now, if you actually look at all of his opponents and you think about how old they were when they fought, their records when they fought as well, they are cans. He has fought cans for 85% of his career. I believe he is also taking this fight on short notice. I think Victor Hugo was slated to fight someone else, actually slated to fight 2 people. I think he was supposed to... I think Joshua Van stepped up. I think his original opponent, Victor Hugo's original opponent, fizzled out. Joshua Van maybe stepped up and then something happened to that. I might be incorrect about that. Do not quote me on that. Moving on to Victor Hugo, Victor Striker Hugo, which I think is an interesting name, as we'll get to in a second. He's coming into this fight at 24-4, a veteran and impressive record. Also making his UFC debut. This is kind of like this doesn't play much into it. I think also Victor Hugo has one of the best Tapology profile pictures. Don't get me wrong, a lot of dudes on Tapology, a lot of fighter pictures, you can see in some of them, at least, that they'll have like a knocked out or finished opponent. I'll just say a finished opponent in the background, somewhere in the picture. With Victor Hugo's, it's like the perfect pose with also the perfect posing finished opponent. I don't know how else to describe it. Look at Victor Hugo's Tapology and let me know what you think about his picture, seriously. I think it's great. It actually, it makes me more confident in the pick. If you watched Victor Hugo's Dana White Contender Series fight, Michael Bisping was doing tricks on it type shit almost a little bit. It was a very impressive fight, though. And I think that's going back to what I said about how Striker is a funny nickname for Victor Hugo. It's because it would seem that his grappling is honestly his true threat. Out of Victor Hugo's 24 wins, 8 of those wins and 2 of his 4 losses have come by way of KO/TKO. 9 of his 24 wins and 1 of those 4 losses have come by way of submission, and he picked up a submission in that Dana White Contender Series fight. With the last 7 of his wins and the last loss coming by way of decision, he is on a 13-fight win streak, 4 fights. The last 4 fights ending by way of finish. He is also on a 4-fight finish streak, not to mention the 13-fight win streak. A prolific finisher, in my opinion. If you include like his losses as well, it could be around approximately like 66%, so basically 2/3 of the time, up to a little bit around like 71 to 72% of the time if you drop his losses for finish rate. Now, granted, most people don't include the losses for finish rate, but it was just in my mind. I would say that he is a prolific finisher. I do think that there's a questionable / inconsistent level of competition that he's faced consistently, hence inconsistent. But I do think that level of competition is stronger than the level of competition that Pedro Falcao has faced. A lot stronger, actually. I also think Victor Hugo is the more well-rounded fighter. He's a bit flashy. He's a bit too flashy for my liking and for his skill level. In terms of striking, he'll throw some like double touch kicks and like spinning back kicks that don't even land. Like he's just trying to throw them out, but hey, he's kind of got a little bit of that confidence. He might have that thing. It's too early for me to tell. He might have that thing. If you listen to Michael Bisping, you would think that he's the Brazilian fucking Conor McGregor because he was comparing him to Conor McGregor. But hey, his real threat, ultimately, Victor Hugo, is grappling. I got Victor Hugo getting this one done by submission. By submission. He might get it done by KO/TKO, who knows? But I really think that it's going to be a submission round. I don't know. I do think it will end as a submission. Victor Hugo by sub. Let's go. Moving on to a women's bantamweight bout. And one that I didn't do too much research on because I'm kind of just letting logic, even though we all know how that one goes. I'm just letting logic define this pick. The women's bantamweight bout being Norma Dumont versus Germaine de Randamie. Now, if this was 4 years ago, I would be scared. I'd be like, oh shit, Germaine de Randamie. Oh shit. It's not 4 years ago. It's the modern day. Germaine de Randamie is damn near 40. She's just had a kid, and she hasn't fought in 3 years. Hey, that is what it is. I'm going with Norma Dumont. Physical stats, Norma's coming into this fight 33 years old, 5'7", with a 67-inch reach. Germaine de Randamie is 6 years her senior, basically 7, at 39 years old, 5'9", with a 72.5-inch reach. Notable reach advantage for Germaine, but honestly, I don't think that she's the same woman. We haven't seen her for 3 years. I can't go with that. I literally cannot pick Germaine de Randamie. If you look on Tapology, you got some people picking Germaine de Randamie by KO, maybe, but I highly doubt that. Like, it's spooky. Norma's coming into this fight 10-2, 6-2 in the UFC with kind of a deceptively good record. I'm not gonna say deceptively good, just a deceptive record because, like, I feel like when you think Norma Dumont, you don't think of a 6-2 UFC fighter. Like, that might sound extremely disrespectful. That's my honest opinion. Even though I gave Norma Dumont a lot of credit when a lot of people were shitting on her, specifically MMA Guru, and they were like, oh, she's dog shit, Chelsea Chandler's gonna dog walk her. Like, brother. But, moving on. You cannot go with Germaine de Randamie in this one. Norma's coming into this fight, like I said, 10-2, 6-2 in the UFC itself. 1 loss by KO TKO that took place in the UFC. 2 wins by submission. 8-1 when it comes to decisions. Despite not being 100% confident in Norma, I got to pick her due to age and activity. That is straight up the only reason why I'm picking her. Moving on. Not even going to finish the rest of Germaine de Randamie's stats. There's no need. There's no need. You can look them up. Welterweight men's bout. Court McGee versus Alex Morono. The Great White Morono. God, Court McGee, man. How many times do we got to teach you this lesson, old man? I don't know what the fuck is going on here, brother. I'm expecting Alex Morono to honestly KO TKO Court McGee in this one. Now, we'll read off the physical stats for this one. We will. Men's welterweight. Court McGee's coming into this fight at 39 years old. 5'11" with a 75.5-inch reach. Alex is 6 years younger at 33 years old, 5'11" with a 72-inch reach. Court McGee's record coming into this fight, 21-12, with 10 of those victories and 11 of those losses taking place in the UFC. On the other hand, we have Alex Morono, who is 23-9, with his UFC record a proud 12 wins, 6 losses, and 1 no contest. Now, I really think that Court McGee is just done. We've seen Court McGee slaughtered. It's over, brother. Alex Morono was always known, even though maybe people didn't think of him as the best or even an amazing fighter, as a good fighter, as a very good fighter, if anything. Way more successful UFC career. Some people might say Alex Morono has fought lesser competition in general in his entire career. Maybe. I'm actually not saying yes or no. I'm just saying maybe. Some people would say that probably. I wouldn't say by much if that is the case. Alex Morono, out of his 23 wins and 9 losses, 6 of those wins and 3 of those losses have come by way of KO TKO. 2-2 in the UFC, respectively. 7 wins by submission, 2 of those took place in the UFC, and 9 wins and 6 losses when it comes to decisions. 8 of those wins and 4 of those losses occurring in the UFC. Matching up to Court McGee, who has 3 wins and 3 losses by KO TKO. He has not got a KO TKO in the UFC. He has only lost 3 times by KO TKO in the UFC. He also has 7 submissions, and he picked up 2 of them in the UFC as well, similar to the same as Alex Morono. And he's 11-9 when it comes to decisions, 8-8 in the UFC. He is coming off of a 2-fight KO TKO consecutive loss streak. It is tough as fuck. He is a grizzled veteran. I just don't think he can take it anymore, really. I think the chin's gone. I think the skills are still there, sure. And maybe at the weight, like the size. I mean, the age isn't the worst possible thing. But I just got Alex Morono. I think Alex Morono takes this one. Moving on to a fight that I'm very excited for. Trevor Peek, a.k.a., as I like to call him, Trevor Tweak. My son Trevor Tweak versus Charlie Campbell. I'm going with Charlie Peek. Charlie Peek. I'm going with Trevor Peek. Now I'm tweaking. I'm peaked. That's what I was saying on Tapology. I'm peaked. I'm peaking right now. Trevor Peek coming into this fight at 29 years old, 5'9", 70-inch reach. Charlie Campbell, 1 year younger, 28 years old, 6 feet tall with a 72.5-inch reach. Now, both of these men have no submissions on their professional records. Trevor Peek is 9-1 with a 2-1 record in the UFC. 8 of his 9 wins have come by KO TKO. He picked up 1 in the UFC as well as on the Dana White Contender Series to get in the UFC. His other win and his only loss have come by way of decision, and they took place in the UFC, both of them. He's a tweaker in the best way, Trevor Peek. He's got that fucking dog in him. He's Trevor Tweak. Trevor Peek, I'm peeking. I got Trevor Peek, brother. Charlie Campbell, I will show you respect. I will read out your stats, obviously. 8-2, 1-0 in the UFC, 5-0 amateur career. Trevor Peek had a 4-2 amateur career. If you wanted to know, 6 wins and 1 loss by KO TKO for Charlie Campbell. 1 win in the UFC. He got knocked the fuck out on the Dana White Contender Series, apparently. I say apparently because, excuse me. I say apparently because this is kind of what I think the secret theme of this card is. Let the fucking dogs out. I think that this fight, they want chaos out of this one, and they want Trevor Peek to... I don't know if they want Trevor Peek to win this one. They're relying on Trevor Peek to be chaotic in this one, even though he was looking a little bit more patient and calculated, I should say, in his last fight. I do think that if he blitzes and he bugs out, if Trevor Peek shows up, we're peaked. We're peaking. Moving on. Lukas Brzeski. Or Brzeski. I don't know how you say it. I'm not Polish. But heavyweight men's foul Lukas Brzeski versus Walter Walker. I believe he is Johnny Walker's brother. Lucas is coming into this fight at 31 years old, 6'4", 78.3-inch reach. These are heavyweights. These are the big boys, biggie lads. Walter Walker is 26 years old, 6'6", with an 81.1-inch reach. So he's a huge dude. Granted, so Lukas Brzeski's big as fuck, but Walter Walker is a huge dude. I think Walter Walker, a lot of the talk, a lot of the noise surrounding him right now is a blend of both excitement, prediction/projection, like valid prediction/projection, I'd say honest, like genuine, fair prediction/projection. And the other part is like kind of cope. It's just hype. Like it is like, I think Walter Walker isn't as nice and clean as everyone thinks that he is, and we might see that. I'm still going to pick Walter Walker to get this one done. Lukas Brzeski is coming into this fight with 8 wins, 4 losses, and a single draw. He has no wins and 3 losses in the UFC. Very tough. 5-2 when it comes to KO TKO. He's gotten knocked out once in the UFC by fucking Waldo Costa or Jesus Christ, man. I don't know why I can't speak right now. By Waldo Salsa Boy. Waldo Cortez Acosta. I don't know what I was saying before, but either way. I do not like Waldo in the slightest. I think he's mids, if you wanted to be really generous. And he smoked Lukas Brzeski. He smoked him bad. He really just hasn't shown us that he's UFC caliber. When it comes to submissions, he has 2 submissions. There's a little asterisk next to that because his Dana White Contender Series victory, which he got by submission, was overturned because he popped for... Let me just read it because I wrote it down here. Clomiphene. For those of you at home who do not know, clomiphene is mainly used to treat infertility in women who do not ovulate. Or I should say for women who do not ovulate. It is a SERM, an SERM, a selective estrogen receptor module, found to have a powerful ability to boost or restore testosterone levels in hypergonadal men. In normal men, 50 milligrams a day for 8 months led to an increase of, it's hard for me to read what I wrote, approximately 870, I'm actually not sure what this unit of measurement is, lowercase ng slash lowercase d capital L, in young men, which I assume is a notable increase because from what I've heard about like test and people saying like test levels and stuff, it seems to be in ranges of like the hundreds. So if something is giving you a 800 boost, I would assume that's insanity actually. But either way, that's what he popped for. That's what Lucas Bresky popped for. That's just for your information. I'm going with Walter Walker. He's fought very questionable opponents, but he is very promising on paper. Also on a 4-fight finish streak. Of his 11 wins, 6 of those have come by way of KO, TKO, 1 by submission, the other 4 by decision. We move on, honestly. I think that's enough of that. To a fight that I also am anticipating. There are some good fights on this card, though, I will say, actually, now reading them over again. At least on paper. Ignacio Bahamondes, a.k.a. La Jaula. La Jaula. I love that nickname. Great nickname. Versus Christos Gallegos. Not sure if that's how you say his name. Bear with me. I got Ignacio in this one. I think that this is a step down in competition from Ludovit Klein. Not by much, though. And this is not a walk in the park by any fucking means whatsoever. Ignacio's coming into this fight 26 years old, 6'3". He's big himself. 75.5. He's not huge, but he's a big guy. Like, he's tall, he's long. Christos is 34 years old, even though he doesn't really look like it. 5'10" and 71.5-inch reach. Ignacio is coming into this fight having dropped his last fight with a now 14-5 record. 3 of those wins, 2 of those losses coming in the UFC. 9 wins by KO, TKO. 1 of them took place in the UFC. 1 win and 2 losses by way of submission. 1 of those wins taking place in the UFC. 4-3 when it comes to decisions. 1 of those wins and 2 of those decisions took place in the UFC. Pardon me. I can hear my buff meowing outside. I love Ignacio. He disappointed me in his last fight. Ludovit Klein is tough as hell. That's a tough opponent. It is what it is. I'm going with Ignacio, though. Christos Gallegos, I think, is a threat. He is a legitimate threat. The thing is, Christos, when he loses, he gets finished. Or he tends to get finished. Christos is coming into this fight with a 20-11 record, 6 wins and 7 losses in the UFC. 8 wins and 2 losses by KO, TKO, 1-1 in the UFC. 4 wins and 6 losses by submission. 2 of those wins and 4 of those losses took place in the UFC. 8-3 when it comes to decisions. 3-2 in the UFC. So basically, what that means is when he gets finished, out of his 11 losses, 8 of them have been by finish. Okay? He has an approximately 73% loss by finish rate, if you can kind of get that, When he loses, 73% of the time, he gets finished. He just gets finished. Shit's rough. Moving on. Ignacio Bahamondes is the pick there. The cage. We're going with the cage. Come on. Ooh. To, I think, could be arguably, I think this actually tied with Dylan Budka, Cesar Almeida, and with the main event. These 3 fights are the hardest to pick, I think, on this card. This is the not the co-main event. This is the featured fight of Morgan Charrier. Or I should say Charrier. I don't know if it's like Charrier like Perrier, or like, because some of the ways I heard his name pronounced is a little different. I don't speak French. But we'll say Morgan Charrier versus Chepe Mariscal. Chepe! Oh, God, get hyped for Chepe, brother. Get hyped for Chepe. I was extremely salty at Chepe because I had backed Jack Jenkins to win their fight, and while the fight wasn't, that's not a fluke. You can't call a fight like it ending like that a fluke. I was just tight. I was like, I can't believe that shit happened. I just can't believe it. Morgan's coming into this fight 28 years old, 5'9", with a 69-inch reach. I said 5'9". I meant to say 5'8" with a 69-inch reach. Chepe matches up 31 years old, 5'7" with a 69-inch reach. Morgan's coming into this bout with a record of 19 wins, 9 losses, and 1 draw. He is 1-0 in the UFC currently. Chepe matches up at 15-6. He is 2-0 in the UFC right now, with a prolific amateur career with 11 wins and 11 wins and no losses. 10 of those wins being finishes. Now, I originally picked Charrier. Thinking back on it and watching just a little bit more tape, reminding myself of the Jack Jenkins fight, Chepe, like Trevor Peek, is a fucking dog. He's a fucking dog. It didn't matter how badly Jack was pelting him with jabs and straights and keeping him at range, catching him every time Chepe wanted to engage and would come in, he would crack the fuck out of him. And Chepe just ate it. He would just eat it. He would eat it. He kept coming. Even then got that success at the end of the first round against Jack Jenkins up against the cage in that little clinch. He started to work a little bit, and that's really why I'm backing Chepe here. I'm backing the dog. I'm backing the dog in Chepe. I think Morgan is extremely, maybe not extremely, he's very technically talented with a lot of potential as well as actual natural talents like power and timing. I think Morgan's timing is really good. It's really, really good. I don't think he's as elusive, or he doesn't deserve the title of being elusive. You will see him using a lot of head movement in his fights, but really the only thing that Morgan does is he pulls. Morgan Charrier, he just pulls. He pulls back. That's the only thing he does. Now, against a lot of people, you might be able to get away with that, even at the pro level, even though people should say, you don't pull back, don't pull back. It's different when you are a pro yourself doing it. But Chepe blitzes. He likes when people do that, if anything. And I thought in Morgan Charrier's fight against the Italian dude, his debut, he won that fight, and he won it handily. But in the beginning, in the first half of it, it wasn't as one-sided. It really was not. And I noticed, or at least I felt like I noticed, when Morgan Charrier was getting pressed and getting blitzed, he did not take it the best. He eventually caught on to the timing of his opponent, of the Italian guy, but he really was not taking it that well at first. I think Chepe can go in there, and if he goes in there like a dog, and he does not let Morgan Charrier set up calm, powerful 1-2s at range, I think he will get Morgan Charrier the fuck out of there by KO TKO. Maybe even in round 1. Maybe, but maybe not. I'm still going with Chepe. I'm very excited for this fight. Chepe has fought a notable amount of future UFC fighters. Granted, he's usually, I say usually as just in above 50% of the time, he usually lost to them, but not always and not even a crazy majority of the time. I think he's fought 6 or 7 UFC fighters, and he's only lost to one more. Beat pre-UFC. This is before he and they were in the UFC. And I think his record is only negative by 1. It's only below 500 by 1. If he fought 7 UFC fighters pre-UFC, he won against 3 of them, and he lost against 4 of them. That's what I'm saying. If it was 6, same thing. He beat 2 of them, and then he lost against 4 of them. That's what I'm saying here. It was something like that. I do remember some of the names. I think he beat Pat Sabatini on one of them. I did write down some notable... Oh, yes. I wrote down some notable names because these people actually KO'd Chepe Mariscal, which is something you should know, but he was KO'd by Steve Garcia, who I really fuck with, and I picked him to smoke that, Oh, God, what was his name? This weird Brazilian dude who everyone thought was going to, like, literally tear him in half. That was juicy. That was such a great underdog pick. That's on my channel, too, by the way, I think. But anyways, you got KO TKO'd by Steve Garcia, Joanderson Brito, and Gregor Gillespie, a name you probably haven't heard of in a long time, but he did get KO'd by him. This was all pre-UFC in 2020, 2019, and 2016, respectively. Now, I don't give a fuck about the 3 KO TKOs. If you just read Chepe Mariscal on paper, he's just a sheet of paper to you, a fighter on paper to you. That might scare you, losing 3 fights by KO TKO. Chepe showed in the Jack Jenkins fight, he still has that chin, and he has fucking heart. It doesn't matter. I'm going with Chepe, man. I'm going with Chepe. Moving on to the co-main event, Alexander Hernandez versus Damon Jackson. This will probably be the shortest one. Second shortest. No, probably the shortest one, with the main event, funnily enough, being the shortest shortest fucking prediction. Alexander Hernandez versus Damon Jackson. I'm going with Alexander Hernandez. I wanted to pick Damon Jackson, but I can't. Alexander Hernandez coming into this fight, 31 years old, 5'9", 72-inch reach. Damon Jackson, 3 years older, at 35 years old, 5'11", with a 71-inch reach. Now, Alexander Hernandez, 14-7 coming into this one, 6-6 UFC record, respectable. 6-3 when it comes to KO TKOs, 3-3 in the UFC with that. 2 wins and 1 loss by submission. The 1 loss came in the UFC. 6 wins and 3 losses by decision. 3-2 in the UFC. Now, really, what I wrote here, he missed weight. You have to know. Alexander Hernandez missed weight bad too. He came in at like 150 or 151 or some shit like that for this fight, which is at I believe it's a featherweight fight, so 145. Yeah, so 145. Damon Jackson also looked like Mr. Skeleton, Mr. Hungry Skeleton. He looked like fucking I was almost going to make a brutal, dark Band of Brothers reference, if you know what I'm talking about. But Damon Jackson was looking like someone they found on Band of Brothers, okay? He was looking crazy. He was looking insane. You might remember Damon Jackson. He was consumed by Ilia Topuria on Ilia Topuria's rise. This is his second UFC run. Little fun fact about him, he had 1 run back in 2014 to 2016. He had 3 fights. Damon Jackson comes into this fight with a 22-win, 6-loss, and 1 draw record. 5 of those wins, 4 of those losses, and the single draw taking place in the UFC, as well as a no contest. He is 4-4 when it comes to KO TKOs, with one of those KO TKOs. One of those KO TKO victories and 2 of the losses coming in the UFC. 15-1 when it comes to submissions, with 2 of them, 2 submission victories, and his only submission loss coming in the UFC. And he is 2-1 when it comes to decisions. All of those took place in the UFC. Consumed by Ilia, missed weight, or opponent missed weight. He looks like shit physically. Well, he looks shredded, but he looks drained as a motherfucker. I gotta go with Alexander Hernandez. But ultimately, what I wrote about this is, this fight is both the beginning and the end. Whatever that means to you, hey, we move on. We move on. To the main event of the evening. It's time. God damn, I don't know why I just did that, but I hope you enjoyed it. The main event, Brendan All In Allen versus Chris the Action Man Curtis 2. This is their rematch. They fought originally back in December 4th of 2021, and Chris Curtis KO'd him. Or I think he actually TKO'd him. He ground and pounded him or some shit. Maybe it started on the feet. Either way, finished him by KO TKO back in December 4th of 2021. So late 2021. Brendan All In Allen is coming into this fight. This is a middleweight fight. At 28 years of age, 6'2", 75-inch reach. Chris Curtis is 8 years older. At 36 years old, he stands 5'10" with a 75.5-inch reach. Chris Curtis has a record of 31 wins, 10 losses, 1 no contest. 5 of those wins, 2 of those losses, and the 1 no contest occurring in the UFC. Brendan Allen matches up with 23 wins, 5 losses on his professional record, 11 of those wins and 2 of those losses having taken place in the UFC. He is mainly known as a grappler, as a submission specialist, if anything. He is on a 6-fight win streak and a 4-fight rear naked choke streak. He has finished his last 4 fights. Brendan Allen has finished his last 4 fights by rear naked choke specifically. Very spooky. Many people call him the dark horse of the middleweight division. I might get hate for this. I think he has one of those very low-key suspect chins that we're going to have to see. It's going to have to be exposed to us, ultimately, I think. What I mean by the suspect chin is not even really in the traditional sense. It's really like, God, and it makes me sound like a fool because, of course, this is how fighting works. Like, when you hear this, you're going to be like, oh, everyone's like that. Everyone's like that, Cole. But sometimes Brendan takes shots that aren't that bad, yet they debilitate him. And he does not recover. I.e. Sean Strickland. I.e. Chris Curtis. It's like that. You know, it's a bit unfair to say because those are his only 2 KO TKO losses. And they took place in the UFC against a future champion and a real crafty veteran in Chris Curtis. Chris Curtis has fantastic takedown defense. We already know his boxing foundation. You know, he fights kind of like Sean Strickland a little bit. 15 of Chris Curtis's 31 wins have come by way of KO TKO. 3 of them took place in the UFC. He has 1 loss by KO TKO. 3-1 when it comes to submissions, 13-8 when it comes to decisions. 2 of those wins and losses by decision took place in the UFC. I do think Chris Curtis wins again. I think Chris Curtis wins again. I will say this, though. I say that, and I'm going with my pick mainly based off of that hunch. God, excuse me. Mainly based off of that hunch. It's unfair to just look at their first encounter, their first fight, because Brendan Allen is basically a completely different fighter. He is a completely different fighter. He has shown tremendous improvement, not only since then, but literally every fight since then. Like I said, he really has earned that kind of moniker. He has earned the mantle of being the title of being the dark horse of the middleweight division. He really can beat a lot of very high level dudes if it's his night. You know, I'm hoping it won't be his night. I'm hoping that Chris Curtis is going to be able to stop the takedowns, maybe make it a little bit grindy and like a clinch or something, and eventually find the chin of Brendan Allen and get this one done by KO TKO. I'm going to recap all my picks real quick one last time, and then I'm going to head out of here because I need to go to sleep because the fights are going to be tomorrow, or today, I should say. So we got Melissa Tanya Mullins. I'm going to say by decision. Please don't take my method of victory so seriously. That's like just a cherry. That's not even the cherry. That's like just, I don't even know, sprinkles or something on top. It's just, you know, that's just garnish. Cesar Almeida. I'm going to go by KO TKO. Jean Matsumoto by decision, I'll say. Victor Hugo, submission, definitely. That one I actually am really picking and riding with. Norma Dumont. I don't see Norma really finishing her, honestly, so I guess I have to logically say decision, but Alex Moreno, I got by KO TKO. Almost, yeah, like I said, round two, something like that. Court McGee gets hurt in a really quick exchange that doesn't seem significant and gets finished. Maybe. We gotta see. Moving on to Trevor Peek, I'll say KO TKO round, I almost said 1, and now I'm going to say 3. I'm going to say that it's a scrappy fight. Neither guy may be dominating. Trevor Peek takes it at the end. Lets the dog out. Lets the fucking dog out of him. Don't let the dog out of me. Don't let the dog out of me. Little Eddie Alvarez quote. Moving on to Walter Walker, who I also got by KO TKO. This is also what starts to scare me when I have multiple people winning by KO TKO in succession. I should say consecutively, rather. But But fuck it. I'm going to go with Ignacio Bahamondes after that. I don't know how he wins that one, honestly. Not to say that, not to doubt it. I just don't know what will ultimately be the method of victory. Moving on, we got Chepe Mariscal. Like I said, KO TKO. I just don't know the round. It could be round 1. I do think that someone is getting finished in that fight, though, in Chepe Mariscal. I think that if you're the betting man, I think a nice bet on that, even though I didn't check the odds, would be not to go the distance. For the co-main, again, Alexander Hernandez. I don't know how he does it, but coming in 5 pounds overweight, opponent looks drained as a motherfucker. I would have to say KO TKO. And then we got Chris Curtis. Again, KO TKO. So if I have everything my way, the last 6 fights roughly end in KO TKO. Maybe 7. Which I highly doubt will happen. But hey, fuck it. I think that's all the picks. Not going to be actually too much rambling about anything else. Just picks this time. I will be giving a nice, timely breakdown, or I should say recap video to these. You can also expect a lot more editing in these videos to come soon, and hopefully better camera quality. I film these videos on my iPhone 8. I do it for you, and for me, but mainly for you. Please like the video if you like it. Dislike it if you dislike it. If you disagree with any of my picks, you want to know more, just talk in general, please leave a comment. I will respond to your comment. We can talk as much as you want in the comments, actually. Subscribe if you'd like to see more comment. Thank you for watching if you watched this long. As always, much love. Big kiss.